For all the rankings I've done so far, I had already seen a lot of the movies going in. There had been some movies on the list that I hadn't seen, but a lot of the marathon was just rewatches. But for Ghibli, yeah, I'd seen their most acclaimed and famous works, but a ton of the movies on this list, including some of their best works, I had never seen them before doing this marathon. So this marathon has value to me beyond the video. Studio Ghibli is absolutely phenomenal. Their ability to have an insane track record with very, very, very few misses is honestly insane to me. This is probably the most fun I've ever had with a marathon. The lowest lows as well, but I just the most I feel like every day I discovered a new amazing work of art, and yeah, this is honestly not only the most fun I've had watching the movies themselves, but probably the most emotional I've ever gotten writing a script for one of these rankings. I'm really, really, really excited to go through all these movies and see how they compare to each other, from the worst to the best. Let's begin. Earwig and the Witch is easily the worst movie I've ever talked about on this channel, and it's not even close. It doesn't feel real. I forgot movies can be this bad, and I'm struggling to think of a single thing good about it, aside from the occasional charming moment. The fucking horrible animation that reminded me of Video Brincado is just the icing on top of the cake. The story here is just as horrendous. It captures what makes spoiled brats so spoiled and bratty. I felt an overwhelming urge to strangle Earwig throughout the whole runtime. And the movie has no joy. There's not enough levity to balance out the misery. Plus, it might have the worst ending to any movie I've ever seen. And the Christmas tree looks horrible and ruins one of the most vibrant holidays. Very few movies in the world can match the shitty, ugly, borderline irredeemable piece of garbage that is Earwig and the Witch. Alright, let's get this over with. Tales from Earthsea is bad, like astonishingly bad. I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. It's a completely lifeless and dull affair that utterly failed to get me invested in anything. The world building in this movie is awful. We never get a good sense of how this fantasy world works and what sets it apart from any other fantasy world. We're told some stuff about dragons at the beginning that potentially seems interesting, and then the movie doesn't use dragons at all or even mention them until the very end, to the point where I forgot they were in the movie. We're told the world is suffering, but we hardly ever get to see it. The characters in this movie are generic fantasy archetypes with no distinguishing characteristics of their own. For most of the movie, we're expected to be invested in the main character's internal struggle, and yet, I don't even know what it is. They don't explain it until the final act, where it's done so poorly. There's no real plight or quest. Our hero just wanders aimlessly and does whatever this wizard guy tells him. There's no scenes that endear us to the characters. There's no scenes where I care about any of them. Well, okay, there's one very good song, but it's the exception. This is a fantasy adventure movie, not a depressing war epic. The direction is hilariously lifeless and flat. The story and characters are shit. It's all just a colossal train wreck. Oh my god, Ocean Waves is terrible. First of all, it's boring. A huge chunk of this film is tepid melodrama surrounding relationships and crushes, and very little of it is engaging. There's a bit of gay subtext between the two male leads, but it's something the movie never capitalizes on and pretends doesn't exist by the conclusion. And they're both kind of boring characters anyway, so it's not like the relationship will be particularly interesting even if it was romantic. The female lead in this movie is one of the biggest bitches I've ever seen in a movie. She's constantly manipulative, insanely petty, and exaggeratedly whiny. She shows up at the main character's hotel room to cry about something, and I'm like, I don't know, getting mildly invested in her sorrow? But then we find out that it's just these basic-ass minor issues, like how her room has different colored wallpaper now. I'm glad the main character at least calls her out for being a bad person, but the movie completely kills my gladness by ending the movie with him realizing he was in love with her the whole time. Then we see this hysterical montage where the main character reminisces on all the great times he had with his female crush, and all the scenes he remembers are her acting like a bitch and manipulating and gaslighting him. They did not have a single positive interaction that could be used in this reminiscence montage. But that's okay because he's in love. This movie can go fuck off. It's 72 minutes, but it feels like an eternity. If the runtime was longer, maybe it could have allowed the film to develop the three main characters whose names I actually don't remember and refuse to learn, and then maybe I'd get wrapped up in their story arcs, but as is, this barely qualifies as a movie. It's just pure shit. I don't fully get the appeal of Ponyo. It tries so hard to match the childhood whimsy of My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service, but what made those movies special is that despite being geared towards kids overall, they had traces of maturity that added a sense of balance. This movie is straight up for kids, and while that makes for an enjoyable viewing experience when I'm in the mood to feel like a kid, it offers nothing that we haven't seen in the aforementioned previous slice of life Ghibli movies. That wouldn't be so strange on its own, but the bizarre thing is that I seem to be the only person who feels this way towards this movie. Everyone loves it, and I genuinely do not understand why. The movie is very charming, with the setup making for a pretty chill movie, but the movie doesn't take advantage of it. I don't understand Ponyo at all. Not only is her personality non existent beyond the basics, but the fact that her physical appearance keeps changing back and forth makes no sense. Why the fuck is the family on the boat so damn casual about seeing two kids on another boat? First of all, regardless of the context, you should be concerned that two kids are out at sea all by themselves. Second of all, this isn't a joyride, it's a goddamn natural disaster. Why are they so cheerful? And yeah, the overly childish tone doesn't help matters. There's a lot of whimsy in movies like My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service, but I connect to them way more due to the solid emotional cores. This movie doesn't really have that. And I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but the childish tone really is my biggest problem with an otherwise decently charming and good movie. It's easily Miyazaki's weakest work and the only Ghibli film, aside from the bottom three, that I don't really feel like ever watching again. But again, this just seems to be like a me problem since everyone loves this film. Pom Poko isn't nearly as weird as I was expecting. I don't fully mean that as a compliment, though. Being weird isn't a bad thing if it's on purpose and used for comedic absurdity, and I kind of expected more of that in the movie. The premise of transforming raccoons who use their powers to fight back against humans stealing their land is a fun one, and there's a lot of neat sequences in this film, like the Nightmare Festival they put on. But overall, I just felt a certain disconnect from the story here. There wasn't really a central main character to latch onto for the majority of the film, and the mockumentary style they were going for with the narrator didn't really work for me. Plus, this movie is way too long. There's a ton of subplots that just don't go anywhere and could easily be cut without anything really changing. After the first hour, I felt like I got the gist of the story already, but it just kept going. In all honesty, the most interesting part of the film was the last 10 minutes, showcasing how the raccoons finally give up and decide to start living as humans. Some of them can't make it in the human world, while some of them adapt a little too well and start encouraging the destruction of the forest for profit. If this is what the story was about, then I feel like it would have been much stronger and more engaging as a film. There could be conflicts between the non-transforming raccoons and the transforming ones, since the non-transformers could think they betrayed their roots. You could do a lot of commentary on how oppressive human society is by comparing it to raccoon society, where they all just live in the moment. They took so many interesting ideas and crammed them into an epilogue voiceover, and I will never understand why. This stuff is so much more compelling than the movie we actually got, which is just kind of okay. It was pretty boring for a good chunk of the film, but there are a ton of fun ideas here and there. When Marnie Was There reminds me a lot of Blade Runner. It's a technically well-made and well-directed film that loses points for how monotone it is on a tonal level. Seriously, I really tried to get into this movie, but I was mostly bored throughout the whole thing. I really hesitate to call it a boring movie. I think it's just not my thing at all. I'm not really at a phase in my life where I'm in the mood for depressing movies, even if they're that way on purpose. And the main character just felt incredibly emotionally distant and stoic throughout, to the point where I wasn't really interested in seeing what happened to her next. Ultimately, I thought the second half of the film was much better than the first, with the plot twist especially being really interesting, and the ending actually hit me pretty hard. It was really well done. The whole movie was well done and atmospheric and lived in, and man, I really wish I could rank it higher. I don't know. I think this is just a me problem, because I don't really have anything to critique with this movie compared to something like Ponyo. I just personally couldn't connect with it that much. My Neighbors the Amadas is a quirky, cute little movie that I watched and enjoyed and now have no strong opinions on looking back. It's a good, charming slice of life series of vignettes about this family. This film is animated in this basic, sketchy newspaper comic style, which is very simple, but still enjoyable to watch. One aspect of this film I really appreciated is how funny it is, way more than the typical Ghibli movie. It really feels like comedy was the main goal for a change, and I think it worked incredibly well. I just kind of feel like maybe this movie wore out its welcome and went on a bit too long for my taste. Oh well, overall, a pretty good, solid, fun time. Just nothing amazing. From Up on Poppy Hill is a movie that was directed by Goro Miyazaki, but the script was written by Hayao Miyazaki, which probably explains why it's so much better than his other two movies. This is a fun, good time, but it's pretty slow and it definitely doesn't have the best Ghibli dynamic between a boy and a girl. It kind of feels like we're treading the studio's usual ground without really doing that much to stand out. It's nowhere close to the blatant copying present in Earwig and the Witch, but it's probably a distant second most derivative Ghibli film out there. Still, I had a fun time watching it, until the last act or so. I feel like the twist in this movie was really lame, poorly set up, and just kind of unnecessary. It just didn't feel very Ghibli to suddenly throw this conflict in during the last act, almost as if they tailored this film's story more towards Western audiences when writing it, since this was about the time Ghibli movies were starting to get distributed in America as they came out. So yeah, this movie's good, just kinda one of the lesser good ones. The Cat Returns is extremely similar to My Neighbors the Amadas. It's very simple and slight, a clear breather in between Studio Ghibli's more ambitious films. And its best attribute is its comedy. I'll admit that the pacing here kinda sucks. It takes more than half the film for these characters to get to this crazy mystical cat kingdom, which wouldn't be a problem in a longer movie, but here, that just feels like a really weird pacing decision. It feels like they should have either gotten to the Cat Kingdom sooner or made the film longer. But honestly, the last act kind of made up for this because it was batshit crazy. So much fun shit happens during this movie's third act that it more than makes up for the fact that this film didn't really have much of a second act. I definitely rank the film higher if it was longer and had time for even more fun, wacky shenanigans, but for what we got, this is still a good, fun time. Plus, I just love the idea of making a spin-off of Whisper of the Heart based on the character in Shizuku's story. This is the kind of story I can picture Shizuku writing about the Baron, which is why the tone is so light and comedic. Very fitting spin-off. The Wind Rises is so good. I mean, it's The Wind Rises, what did you expect? Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this one, it's just very good. The characters are incredibly compelling, and I love the relationship between Jiro and Neihoko. The dream scenes in this movie are absolutely mesmerizing. The animation is insanely gorgeous, which, I mean, you can say that about almost every Ghibli movie, but this one really sticks out. I really like how similar to Oppenheimer this was. Like, holy shit, the parallels aren't just surface level. If I had any problems with this film, I'd say it was way too long. Like, it got very repetitive at a certain point. I honestly don't think this movie really needed a thought-out narrative. It could have just been framed as a documentary, but oh well. It's really good and engaging and pretty much impossible to hate. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is the first Ghibli film ever made. It's clear that even relatively early in his career, Miyazaki was an incredibly ambitious storyteller and filmmaker. The scope of the story is wonderfully grand, and the tone is as serious and heavy as it needs to be. With that said, it kind of took me a while to get into this one. The first act wasn't boring, but it wasn't particularly engaging either. It certainly had its moments, but for the most part, I wasn't really getting hooked by the main character. First attack scene happened, things really start to get more interesting. I found this sense of surreal beauty in the toxic forest. Plus, I enjoyed the character interactions and conflict. As the climax approached, the stakes felt significantly high, and there was still a sense of humanity there. Eventually, when I saw the climax, I couldn't help but marvel at the epic scope of this post apocalyptic world and its story. It was well worth watching to get to the second and third acts. I just wish the first act was more engaging. Overall, not an amazing film, but a really good one and well worth watching. Howl's Moving Castle is a simple yet inherently likable movie. It's basically everything you'd expect one of the most popular Ghibli movies to be: charming, sweet, and adventurous in spite of some darkness lingering under the surface. However, there are some aspects of this movie that I just found myself a little disappointed by. For instance, the villain. Her sudden turn towards the end is so jarring and makes no sense considering her attitude throughout most of the story. That, coupled with her frankly cliche dialogue, makes her a huge pile of missed potential. I love the side characters, but I feel like they don't have enough to do in the story, especially during the third act. And the main characters, while decent, really aren't too terribly interesting. Ultimately, I do love the pacing, the atmosphere, and the really cool visual design of this movie's world. It's also neat that this rewatch confirmed an opinion I've had for a while, that the movie isn't as mediocre as I thought it was when I first watched it. It's a good, fun adventure, just not the best. Porco Rosso is a pretty fun time with a pretty unique vibe compared to most Ghibli movies. There's no fantastical elements aside from the fact that the main character is a pig, which is a surprisingly minor detail. It's a realistic story about a bounty hunter, and I really like it. The characters are fun, and I love Porco's relationship with Fio, who's just such a fun and amazing character. The final battle was great too. This is a fun, good movie, but I couldn't help but ask for more with some aspects of it. It didn't feel like it was fully realized, and the ending was really bad and anticlimactic. But overall, I liked it a lot. Can you believe Hiromasa Yonebayashi once made a film that was right up my alley? Yeah, it turns out his first film, The Secret World of Arrietty, is actually great. I mean, this was made when Ghibli was trying its hardest to appeal to Western audiences, so it makes sense why he'd put less of a personal stamp on it and want to just do a movie in the same vein as Miyazaki's movies. But even ignoring the story and just looking at the direction, this is better than when Marnie was there. The characters are more expressive, the framing of shots is better, the editing and the way the film flows is just on point. I feel like the opening should have presented a stronger visual contrast with the rural life Sean is moving to compared to the city he lived in, but that's more so on the script. The direction here is solid overall, and I find the story really engaging. It's a nice, simple slice of life story about a romance between a tiny borrower and a human. Should I go into details about the physical implications that would have to be considered if these two people of drastically different sizes actually ended up together? No, I don't think I will. I was very happy, and you should be too. It's a very sweet and charming story with characters who have good chemistry and a family you want to see succeed. I had a really good time with it. And now, we are entering the top 10. My Neighbor Totoro is the happiest movie ever made. Seriously, is there anyone who hates this movie? And if so, who hurt you? Now, with that said, it doesn't work perfectly for me. While the slice of life stuff is excellent, it's not as engaging as it could have been. The movie has no story, and while I like that in theory, since it's a slice of life movie and the simplicity is the point, it could have been a bit more. I didn't want any conflict, I just wish there was more whimsy. The world is so creative, and I don't feel like we see as much of it as we should. But overall, this is an enjoyable, amazing movie that I highly recommend. Castle in the Sky is amazing. The two main characters embody childlike wonder and innocence so well, and it's so beautiful to see them spark up and start enjoying life again after meeting each other. The bond the two of them share is just so beautiful and intriguing, and the imagery of this movie is so striking and gorgeous, even more so than the typical Ghibli movie. It's just such a touching, dreamlike experience that really sucked me in from beginning to end. Some of the plot threads could get a little messy at times, and the reveal as to who the villain really was kinda unnecessary. It's a neat twist, and it makes for a compelling aspect of the story, but at the same time, his outright greediness was far more compelling. But it's still effective, and besides, in the end, the impact the two main characters leave on each other's lives is just beautiful. Even though this movie has problems, it's an incredibly emotionally investing experience that I still highly recommend. Princess Mononoke is so cool. This is easily the most epic Ghibli movie, showing such a large scale conflict and keeping the story incredibly grounded and focused on a handful of characters. I got really invested in everything going on because the movie takes its time to establish all these compelling storylines and factions and then bring them together for such an epic climax. It's also really cool that the movie doesn't care about appealing to kids and shows bloody decapitations and murder. It makes the story feel so much more visceral than it otherwise would be, and the characters are so distinct, both when compared to each other and in comparison to other Ghibli characters. I also love the scenery and visuals. This is just such a phenomenal and beautiful movie that I would highly recommend. I don't have any jokes for this segment. I don't even know if I have anything I can really say at all. Grave of the Fireflies broke my heart in a way that no other movie has done before. It starts off insanely sad and gets more and more intense the longer it goes on, culminating in some absolutely soul-crushing moments and sequences. I don't want to spoil a thing about it if you haven't seen it yet, since I went to it completely blind, and I think that was for the best. Just know that it's a tremendously well-made film, even though I don't want to feel the way it made me feel when watching it for a long time. Only Yesterday is the kind of movie I wish mainstream animation studios would make. It's such an endearing movie about living life and trying to figure yourself out as you're growing up. It reminded me a lot of films like The Fabelmans or Annie Hall, two movies I adore so much. This movie is no different. It's so valuable to any person who likes simple movies that I occasionally chill with the plot and just focus on the amazing characters and immaculate vibes. I love the contrast between the present scenes and the childhood scenes, as they're shown in different art styles. The childhood stories are very simple, but so engaging and entertaining, and I love watching Taiko in the present remember these stories and reminisce about them with the people around her. It's a structurally genius movie, and it all comes together so beautifully, especially by the amazingly realized ending. My only real issue here is that it ends before it tells its full story. The scene where she leaves the train with her childhood self feels like a very compelling moment that should have been part of the movie itself rather than being in the background of the credits. But this movie means so much to me, I don't care about minor stuff like that. Kiki's Delivery Service has all the charm and whimsy of something like Totoro, but with an actual story for us to follow and get invested in. Well, maybe story isn't the best word. This movie isn't particularly plot-driven as much as it is character-driven. It's all about the burnout you can experience from doing something you love too much because you try to make it your job. Kiki's struggle in this movie to rediscover what she loved about flying in the first place is such a relatable conflict, and I connected with it immensely. Same with going out into the world on your own and trying to make it. It's a movie that's great for kids, but I think it hits even harder for young adults who maybe don't know their place in the world yet. On top of how identifiable the movie is, it's just fun. It's funny, it's whimsical, it's magical, the characters are all memorable and enjoyable. It's one of the first things I think about when the name Ghibli comes up, because it represents so many of the studio's best qualities. It's delightful and great for kids, while also being really valuable for older people. It's got so many memorable moments and sequences. I think Kiki and Ursula's relationship is one of the best in all of Ghibli. Part of me feels like this movie didn't need a big epic blimp crash climax, but it still fits in pretty well, I think, and it's a good conclusion. In case you couldn't tell, I adore this movie, and I highly recommend it. The Boy and the Heron. In my opinion, this is Hayao Miyazaki's best film since Spirited Away, and one of only two Ghibli movies that won Best Animated Feature. Back when it first came out, I genuinely was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I heard it was divisive and not super plot focused, and kinda similar to Howl's Moving Castle in a lot of ways. And honestly, that movie's lack of cohesion is one of its biggest issues. The good news is that this movie is nothing like Howl's Moving Castle because it's actually a masterpiece. It really is closest to Spirited Away in terms of structure, because it's mainly just one kid exploring a mystical new world and coming across creative, enticing concepts and characters one at a time. It's not an incredible plot, but it's not trying to be. It's a movie that you're meant to feel, not so much think about the logistics and how this world operates. It just sucks you in with the same whimsy and magic, but also darkness and intensity as a lot of previous Ghibli films. I saw a lot of takes that took issue with that, saying that this is just a reheated mashup of every other Miyazaki movie. And to that I say, yes, that's the point. The main message of this film is that we need to accept that there is no other filmmaker alive that can replicate Miyazaki's kingdom of dreams and madness. The old man in this is an allegory for Miyazaki. The building blocks are the elements that make up his movies, and the part where Dave Bautista just haphazardly stacks them with no rhyme or reason, that was him making Earwig and the Witch. The Boy and the Heron is okay, real talk. I don't want to call it that. This movie is not about the bond between the boy and the heron, and it should have just been called the same thing that it was called in Japanese. How Do You Live? It's a much more fitting title. How Do You Live is a movie about accepting that not everything lasts forever, and it's okay for things to end. There is no true successor to the Ghibli brand. Miyazaki is irreplaceable, and promising new anime filmmakers do not need to be the next Miyazaki. We should all forge our own path in life, instead of enveloping ourselves in the past and trying to maintain a legacy for no other reason than just to maintain it. This feels like a much more fitting swan song for one of the most visionary directors of all time than The Wind Rises did. And even then, Miyazaki apparently has at least one more film in him. But whatever it is, I just don't think he can top this one. This is the second best thing he's ever made, in my opinion, striking a balance between something ethereal, funny, devastating, and just so filled with wonder. There's never a dull moment. The movie always has something new up its sleeve, brought to life with stunning, colorful animation and an impeccable score. But it's also mature and tragic. You really sit with Mahito's grief and get invested in it. You understand why he's not the most expressive Ghibli protagonist. That just makes those rare moments where he smiles or gets taken in by the beauty of this world all the sweeter. The Heron was not what I expected this character to be at all, but man, he's a delightful addition to the film. And of course, Robert Pattinson absolutely killed it in the dub. Okay, I've been going on for a while. The point is, The Boy and the Heron is insane. A miracle movie. The best film of 2023. I adore it. So, before I started this marathon, I kind of thought that Spirited Away being number one was a foregone conclusion. So, even though, to my utter surprise, I have managed to find something even better, I'm not trying to diminish how great this one is, and it has not gotten worse in my mind. It's just as good as everyone says it is, to the point where I don't know if I have anything left to add, honestly. I talked about it in the Best Animated Feature ranking video, and I'd still rank it as high as I did on that list. It's just such a beautifully realized film, taking all of Ghibli's best attributes and magnifying them to an insane degree. It's the most vivid and whimsical Ghibli world ever created. It's magical and welcoming, but also dark and sinister when it needs to be. Every single character is memorable in their own right, and the main character's growth is astonishing. It's a movie that simultaneously has an incredibly compelling overarching plot, while also being a great episodic film to just vibe to. Everyone has said every possible good thing about this movie. It's Hayao Miyazaki's best film, and one of the best animated movies ever made. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. it doesn't feel real. I forgot movies can be this good, and I'm struggling to think of a single thing wrong with it. The amazing art style that perfectly captures the aesthetic of ancient Japanese folklore is just the icing on top of the cake. The story here is just as phenomenal, perfectly capturing the dangers of caring too much about beauty and how it leads to the loss of authenticity and freedom. I felt bad for Kaguya throughout the whole runtime, and the movie isn't joyless. There's still enough levity to balance out the darkness. Plus, it might have the best ending to any movie I've ever seen, and the last shot has so much symbolic value that I will continue to unpack. Very few movies in the world capture the authenticity, beauty, elegance, and sheer power of the tale of the Princess Kaguya. But somehow, this is still not number one. Where do I even start? Whisper of the Heart shocked and stunned me on every level. The last time I got this emotional over a movie was when I first saw The Fablemans 2 years ago, so it's been a while. The concept of the main character rewriting the lyrics of Country Roads to practice her writing sounds like a joke, but the movie gets me super invested in these variations of the song as it goes along, showing Shizuku's creativity in the process. My favorite scene in the whole movie is just her and Seiji performing the song together, only for his grandfather and his friends to walk in and start performing with them. It's just a magical moment that is so well built up to, and a beautiful way for the two leads to come together. Shizuku and Seiji's chemistry over the course of the film is amazing, and the way they challenge each other's views on the creation of art is beautiful. And that's really what's at the core of this film, the struggle to create something, to be an artist. Shizuku grapples so hard with so many immensely relatable struggles regarding her writing, constantly having to ask herself, is it good enough to show others? I'll fully admit that I probably connected this film so much because of how much I saw my own struggles with writing in Shizuku. But regardless, I feel like this is the kind of film that anyone can relate to and see themselves in. Anyone who's anxious about their life and what the future holds will probably derive a ton of value from this film. And even besides that, it's just a really charming slice of life story. The romance is sweet and endearing, the characters are all enjoyable, the animation and score really stick out and create such beautiful moments, even by Ghibli standards. The plot is very simple, especially during the first half, but in a good way. This is an incredibly well realized and beautiful depiction of someone who's just trying to figure out their place in the world and discover their self worth through art. I cried towards the ending, and I couldn't stop thinking about this movie for days after I watched it. It's just beautiful. Not just my favorite Ghibli movie of all time, not just my favorite 2D animated movie of all time, but one of the few movies I would give a 10 out of 10 to. And we haven't had a 10 out of 10 in a ranking video since the Best Animated Feature winner ranking. I am begging you guys to watch it.